opportunity to be here today and to see all of you here. And as we here as an organization, as a state and as a nation, pause now as we near the 20th anniversary of 9/11, it is a difficult time. It is a time that we look back over the last 20 years. We look at how it has changed us individually. We look at how it's changed us as an organization, and we look at how it has changed us as a nation. Many of our young soldiers that are entering our ranks today may not even have been born on 9/11. Some, though, were just small children. As we look in the audience here today, and as you would in any of our formations, we have a mixture of young soldiers and some a little more seasoned. And some of the more seasoned soldiers have been with us through some very challenging times over the last 20 years. Through our efforts in Iraq, through our efforts in Afghanistan, through our efforts in supporting operations in other parts of the world, and then here on the home front doing the things that were necessary to ensuring the safety of our citizens and our families here following those events after 9/11. When we began to look at how we could honor the service and sacrifice of our soldiers, airmen, and I will extend that to all of our service members of all branches that have served this great nation over the last 20 years, we looked at trying to focus, really on what the contributions that the South Carolina National Guard has made and what our units have done in support of the war fight, what our units have done in support of securing the homeland. One of the things that I realized along the way, and it's nothing new to us, that to get at a mission of this magnitude, it really forced us, if you want to use that word, but more importantly, it allowed us the opportunity to seek out and continue to make partnerships. And as we look at this particular threat of 9/11 and what happened at the Pentagon, what happened in the fields of Pennsylvania, it struck that it was an attack on U.S. soil. And it was an attack that I think sent a message to us that the vast oceans of the Atlantic and of the Pacific and where our threats had historically been, our borders were not as safe and secure as they once were, or at least as we perceived them to be. And our initial response following 9/11 was in getting out and securing critical infrastructure here in South Carolina and working with law enforcement, working with other entities to ensure we identified what those critical infrastructure, what those possible threats would be that we could secure and work to ensure that we had the framework necessary to begin to focus outward of where our next efforts may be. And what you will see in the documentary, talks of that. But more importantly, it gets at and discusses the perspective of how life has changed, how it individually affected us. And it's not just the soldier and the airman that bore this, and I would say burden, but it's more importantly, bore this responsibility to the oath that we took when we all joined, when we raised our right hand to support and defend the Constitution of this great nation and of this great state, as a guardsman would do. And again, for those that are a little bit more seasoned, this has been a career-defining event in our lives, from the beginning to where we are today and where we will be tomorrow. We're living that each and every day. But We also recognize that what took place on 9/11 not only did not have the impact just on our service members and their, but it also impacted families. And we certainly mourn and recognize the loss of the innocence of life that was lost in the Twin Towers and in the aircraft on 9/11 in Pennsylvania. And realized, I believe, maybe for the first time, that what we had grown up to believe, that this country itself, the homeland, was safe. It provided certainly a stark contrast to that, and we had to begin then to look inward as we looked outward in defense of this nation. And I've always been amazed by how well our soldiers and airmen adapt to the challenges that they have. And for the last 20 years, that focus has to have been directly on support of the war fight. But it didn't mean other things didn't have to be done, and they did. And our ability to respond to other needs of this state, other needs of this nation, whether it's in response to a natural disaster such as the hurricanes that we dealt with, such as the COVID pandemic, it just put a premium on what service and sacrifice means to not only the organization, but to the families. And we have asked a lot of our families over the last 20 years. Historically, it was, that 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks of annual training, and maybe an exercise here or there that would carry you away from home for a few weeks. Well, we have seen that significantly change over the last 20 years. And I would think those changes that we have seen are somewhat now normalized in the day-to-day operations of the force. And I believe we have began to look out and expect now that when the young soldier, young airman joins our ranks, not only do they expect more, they want more in terms of having a role in helping defend their communities, helping to defend their families, and helping to defend the citizens of this great nation. So I would like to thank all of our soldiers and all of our airmen, but a special thanks to their families. For those who have served overseas in harm's way, realistically, you always had a pretty good understanding of what those threats were. Depending upon where you were assigned and what particular job or mission your unit may have had, you had an understanding of what those threats were. And it may be that it was periods of time where it was relative security, then marked by periods of time of pretty significant activity, and that ebb and flow just kind of continued day in and day out. But to our loved ones here back at home, to the mothers, the fathers, the wives, the husbands, to the children who only saw 30-second sound bites on CNN or Fox or whatever news channel, they didn't have that benefit. They didn't have that kind of understanding of what the threat was to their loved ones. So they lived with it basically 24/7, and it was difficult. And trying to manage that, especially if there were young children in the home, trying to convey to them that mommy or daddy is going to be all right, and that we need to continue to push forward with our lives here, that mommy or daddy can do their job without worrying about us, was a challenge. And I've heard stories from our soldiers, from airmen, from their family members that outline some of those challenges. And I think now, looking back, I believe most families grew from those challenges. They would say they became a stronger entity as a result of that. Individually, people found strength that they didn't know they had. They may have found courage that they didn't realize they had, but it was a price that was paid that wasn't something that we had expected probably prior to 9/11. And certainly to our Gold Star mothers and our Gold Star families. You know, and when we have a chance to get out and speak to groups, often we'll talk about Blue Star mothers, and then the conversation generally we will carry to Gold Star mothers. Blue Star mothers is a pretty select organization in of itself, but you become a Blue Star mother by having a son or a daughter who is serving, or a loved one who is serving at the time of that you're, quote, a Blue Star mother. And many of our Blue Star mothers have been with us from day one in supporting the events that we are a part of, whether it's our Yellow Ribbon Welcoming Home events, whether it's events that we honor and recognize other servicemen and women, our veterans. But when you shift that conversation to a Gold Star mother and to a Gold Star family, that is truly a shift of almost unbearable thought of what it means. It means that that loved one of yours, that son or daughter, gave their life in service to this great nation. Gave their life in service to this great nation. And as we come up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, so that will have meant there's been 20 Memorial Days since 9/11, where as a nation we paused to stop and recognize the service and sacrifice of the men and women of past and of present who have made that ultimate sacrifice. When you stop and think about it, to that Gold Star family, every day is a Memorial Day. Every day they get up with the understanding and the realization that their loved one is no longer physically with them. Those birthdays, those anniversaries, those other events that they would have been present at, that no longer occurs. But in talking with our Gold Star mothers, a couple themes have consistently been a part of those conversations. And one is that their loved one, if they could have stopped the hands of time and rewrote that event, that the possible outcome would be that they would have survived at the expense and loss of one of their battle buddies, of one of their comrades, one of their friends, or that the mission may have been sacrificed and may have failed as a result of that. The answer that they have come back with is no. That their loved one loved what they did. They loved serving this great nation. But more importantly, they loved those that they served with and served side by side. That is a tough message. That is a message I think deep down we all would hope and believe that's who we are as soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines that are dedicated to the mission and are dedicated to our buddy left and right of us. The second message that our Gold Star mothers and families say is we must tell the story. We cannot forget the service and sacrifice of their loved ones. And I would suspect that that message has been with us since the founding of this nation. That every mother, that every family that has lost a loved one would have hoped that their service and their sacrifice would not be lost on the hands of time and of history as time went on. And as a nation, we honor those who have paid that sacrifice. You look at what happened in World War I, you look at what happened in World War II. Young American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines left homes to travel to countries that maybe some could not have identified on a map or a globe. And I would suspect that there are some of us 20 years ago, if asked to find on a map or a globe where Afghanistan or where Iraq were, would have been challenged in a similar way. But those soldiers of World War I, of World War II, and every generation answered the call to this great nation. And the only thing that we've ever asked for was a place to bury and honor our fallen servicemen and women. I had an opportunity a few years ago on the 100th anniversary of World War I to travel to France, where some units from South Carolina were instrumental in some of the major battles of World War I. Walked the battlefields, walked the cemeteries. Some of the trench works from World War I are still in place. And as you stood there and kind of isolated myself, let my thoughts kind of run a little bit, try to imagine what it would have been like. And if you've seen a movie with World War I footage, film footage, in those trenches, waiting for that whistle and waiting for that command to go over the top. You had to know that that was probably your last time over the top. But they did it because that was their job, and they believed they were fighting for something that was important, and they were willing to die for if necessary. Had a chance to go over to Normandy. One day, quick trip, got to Omaha Beach. In July, misty rain, stood there overlooking the channel and imagined those landing craft coming forward. And just as the movies again, when the ramps went down, when the soldiers exited the ramps, they probably had to believe that that may have been their last day. But they did it again because they believed it was the right thing to do in service to this great nation and to help bring freedom and hope to other people. And you fast forward to 9/11, and we saw what happened, and many of our young men and women who were just citizens on that day said, I need to serve this great nation. I need to do what is necessary to help defend this homeland and ultimately maybe help defend freedom around the world. And those young men and women boarded planes and flew to a country again they may not have known really much about, and they flew not knowing exactly what they were going to get into, but they did it because they believed it was the right thing to do. And that day that they paid the ultimate sacrifice to this great nation was not a mistake that they made. They did it because they, in their heart, believed it was the right thing for them, for their families, and for this great nation. And for that, I am honored and humbled to have had a chance to serve with some of these fine servicemen and women in both the Army and the Air National Guard here in South Carolina. And to have had a chance to get to know some of them and to know a little bit about them personally makes it even more of a special memory as we approach the 20-year anniversary. Those visible wounds of war that we see are tragic enough. But thankfully, due to the health care that's afforded to us in this great nation, many of those visible wounds of war we're able to deal with. And we have seen miraculous things from young men and young women that they've been able to accomplish after maybe having lost arm, a leg, or multiple limbs. A testament to that human desire, that human drive to always seek to be the best that you can be, to overcome adversity. But we also have faced, no different from any other time in the history of this great nation, we just didn't recognize it to the extent, and we may have called it other things, but we say now those invisible wounds of war. We know it has had a significant impact in our organization, not only for the soldiers and airmen of the South Carolina Guard, but throughout the entire military force of this great nation. And as always, I would encourage our servicemen and women to be that strong individual that you are, and when you need help, reach out and get help. And more importantly, though, as a battle buddy and a wingman of that maybe soldier or airman needing help, do that really tough thing and seek out and encourage them to get help. That's real friendship. That's really service to your buddy to help them out when they need help. Our Soldier's Creed, Airman Creed, all basically get to the same thing. You never leave a fallen soldier. You never leave a fallen comrade. And to let one suffer, and to let one suffer in silence, goes directly against that creed. So again, I would ask that all of us collectively lift up this organization and to do the things that are necessary to help us through some challenging times. Now, over the last few weeks, it's been especially difficult, especially for those that may have served in Afghanistan, but I would say it's equally for those who have served in harm's way at any point in time. This nation, though, and the servicemen and women of this great nation did their job. We engaged the enemies on the battlefield. We were successful in those engagements. We did what was necessary to complete what our missions were. And the service and the sacrifice of all the men and women of the South Carolina National Guard should be honored and recognized as being what it was, outstanding. You were given missions, you accomplished missions. You did what you were asked to do, and you did it quite well. So walk with your head high. Be proud of your service. Your family should be proud of your collective service. And don't question why. Just be thankful that you did, and did what you did as well as you did, and move forward. Because our job is to always be ready for the next event. We have to prepare ourselves to be ready for the next event. And for the Guard, what that next event may be is a pretty wide range. Right now, we're currently dealing with a resurgence of the COVID pandemic with the Delta variant. We've got today soldiers that are in Louisiana helping the citizens of Louisiana dig out of Hurricane Ida. We've got soldiers on the southwest border. We've got soldiers up in the National Capital Region, and we just got the 169th Fighter Wing back home from a deployment overseas. Yes, we will pause today and at multiple times over the next few days to honor the service and sacrifice and to remember what happened on 9/11. But to those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who paid the ultimate sacrifice, they would tell us, if they could, that you've got to drive on. You've got to continue to march. You've got to continue to be prepared for that next mission. Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Ready for what that call may be. And I am confident that from what I've seen over the last 20 years and what I see each and every day and what I believe are still some of the greater days for this country are still ahead of us, I am confident that we can be a part of writing that success story. There is no reason to believe different. This nation has faced many challenges over the course of our history. And if you were someone that studies history, you can see that in many of those great challenges, there were positive things that came out of them. And I hope you believe that we can, we will, and we must do the same thing here today. I do believe as a nation we are fortunate and blessed to live in a country that affords us the freedoms and the opportunities that we have. But ladies and gentlemen, those freedoms and those opportunities don't come free. They do not come free. So we pause, we remember, we honor, we reflect, but then we move on. But we will never cease to forget. It is what allows us to do what we do, because you know, I know, that when it happens again, and it will, history says it will, there must be other young men, other young women who are willing to step up and to be counted when it's time to take action and do the right thing. So I am thankful that we have this day. We will show our 9/11 commemorative documentary that was put together. It tells a story from the beginning to as much of current day's activities as we can. And it allows us, again, to honor those that we have worked with. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for being a part of this organization and allowing us to be where we are. And thank you to your families for being there to allow you to do this.
I'm Leon Lott. I'm a soldier in the South Carolina State Guard, but I also have the privilege and honor to be the commander of the South Carolina State Guard, a very historic military organization that for 351 years has protected this state. 351 years. Men and women have stood up and said, I'm here. Send me. I'm here to protect this state. Previous commanders of the State Guard have been Francis Marion, Swamp Fox, Thomas Sumter, Andrews Pickens. Also, Senator Strom Thurmond was a member of the State Guard. All who believed in this state, who was willing to wear this uniform to go out and protect this state. Now, after 9/11, Most of us in this room said, what can we do? Some of us were too old to join the National Guard or another service, but the State Guard was available for us. I was one of those. I was one of those that was willing and ready to do something to defend this country and defend this state. So I joined the South Carolina State Guard. Many others were like me who joined the South Carolina State Guard and continue to be in the South Carolina State Guard. We had members of the South Carolina State Guard that deployed to New York City after 9/11 to assist in recovery up there. Men and women who care, men and women who are willing to give everything they've got to protect this country, but also to protect this state. Now, I guess if you want to describe the South Carolina State Guard, we're your little brother. We're your little brother. When you need us, we're there. We're there to come help you. And that's what we've done for the past 20 years, is when our state and our National Guard needed assistance in many different areas, we were able to step up and provide that assistance. We were there when you needed something. We were there when our engineers needed to go out during a 1,000-year flood, during this past pandemic. We were there. Our chaplains were there when it was time for you to go, be deployed, our chaplains were there to pray for you and be there with you and give you comfort. Our attorneys, our lawyers were there to help you get ready to deploy. Our medical doctors were there also. Our law enforcement, that's part of the State Guard, was ready to go when we needed to go and work at shelters, work at pods, provide security. They were ready to go. And then we just have regular general purpose soldiers who were ready to go out and do anything. See, that's what our job is. We will do anything that's necessary to protect the state and necessary to help you do your job the best that you can do. That is what the South Carolina State Guard does, and that's what we continue to do. During the pandemic, we were involved in helping set up pods. We were involved in setting up hospitals. We were involved in setting up security at the JOC. We were there. Whatever is needed, the South Carolina State Guard has always been there for 351 years. Think of that history. If you go to Olympia Armory, our home, and look at the wall inside, you'll see pictures of all the State Guard commanders. That is the history of the state of South Carolina. That is the history of all of us. What do we do now? We're still doing whatever you need us to do. Whatever you need us to do, we're going to be there, and we're going to do that. Now, General McCarty talked about sacrifices. Yes, there was lots of sacrifices made. Some of them made the ultimate sacrifice. One of them worked for me in my other job. One of them was a deputy sheriff. His name was Ryan Rawl. He was a first lieutenant. 9 years ago, he was killed in action in Afghanistan. His mother's greatest fear was that her son would be forgotten. He will never be forgotten. I want you all to remember that name. And there's others, not others beside Ryan. Remember Ryan Rawl's name. When we look back and we talk about 20 years ago and what's happened past 20 years and where we're at today as we recognize the 20th anniversary, don't forget about those named Ryan Rawl and others who gave their life somewhere else in another country for all of us to be free and for all of us to be safe. Remember his name. Remember the names of the others. Each one of them had a mother who probably feels the same way. I don't want my son to ever be forgotten. Just say his name, Ryan Rawl and others. Just say them in your heart. Say them in your heart. But the South Carolina State Guard, our motto is trained and ready. That's what we do. We train and we're ready to deploy wherever we're needed within this state. And we're ready to be your little brother and be there and help you out whenever you need us. As I sit down, though, I want everybody to do something for me. If you would, let's just have a moment of silence for Ryan Rawl and the rest of those who gave their life in defense of this country. Thank you. God bless each one of you. God bless the state of South Carolina and this great nation. Thank you.